Austin, we did it. I'm so excited to have you on the All Access Pass for the Backstage Pass podcast. The purpose of chatting with you and our amazing members is really to dive in on your innovation, the problems that you solved within dentistry, your solutions to it, really your expertise. I'm not going to waste any time. We're just going to get down and dirty, right? We're all busy. We're all entrepreneurs. We're all doing a million things at a time, and we just want to bring massive value to our listeners. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to just warm us up a little bit. And hear a little bit about your origin story. Okay. So before we jump into the nitty-gritty, the meat, how would you describe what you really do, like in your own words, for the layman?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on today. Super excited to be here and excited for the future and what's to come. So really, just to kind of explain it on really easy terms, my goal is to help dentists transition their practice in the most effective way, and ultimately that comes in different shapes and sizes. But the ultimate goal is to get them buyer ready and help educate them about the process, what that looks like, help them get ready for a sale, and ultimately help dentists sell their practice.
That's awesome. There's so much need in that and
Absolutely.
being done differently.
Yep.
I could say that for sure. Well, so how did you first get connected with Backstage?
Yeah. Actually, another piece of my business that I have is a service that I like to call diligent staffing. And so I help, whether it's DSOs or other brokerage firms, kind of act as an in-house resource to help them with M&A. I originally got connected with Elijah through his firm, Dental Pitch Brokerage, and I do some work for them, helping them execute dental practices that they're selling. And so, as Elijah and I have gotten to know each other over the course of this year, he started talking about Backstage, this wonderful group that he had, and just knew that, with what I was doing on my end and what he was, creating, I think it was a perfect match.
Must have been heart-centered then, if he invited you. That's
Yeah,
pretty great.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, dentistry is a different industry, right? Um, but what I like to ask is, what really lights you up the most in thinking about your work in dentistry in this industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way I like to think about it is that I'm helping dental practice owners, with a very important piece of their career. For a lot of them, this is the only time they're going to do it, and I think it deserves to have the right care and attention that it deserves. As it is such a big and important event. A lot of these dentists have spent their entire careers building their practices. They have such a legacy in their community. It's an important piece to their family as well. I just really think that being able to work with them through such an important period of time in their life and their career is super rewarding and one that deserves to be handled with the utmost care and ultimately help them lead to the most successful outcome for them.
I mean, that's amazing. It's great, right? Very soulful in that, but I guess what that leads me to ask is, what problem then in dentistry did you see that
Hmm.
made you do it differently, right? That
Yep.
made you come up with a solution, differently or start your business that's different than your competition.
Yeah, so I started my career in dentistry at a large DSO where I was working for them on the buy side. So what that means is helping them acquire dental practices. We were private equity backed. During my time, we were extremely busy. We, acquired, over 150 locations during my time there, and really got, the full experience, what it was like. For dental practice owners that are going through this process. And what I quickly came to realize, and I was in this role for a little over 4 years, but it didn't take 4 years to come to this realization, is that a lot of people that are in the space today, don't have that care and attention to detail that I think they really deserve when they're going through this process. And so being able to be a resource to help educate them what the process looks like, help them look out for the pitfalls that are out there. And ultimately, our goal is to make sure that they're as well educated going into this so that they can make the most informed decision possible. And that was really something that, I felt was, taken lightly. And I think there wasn't there wasn't necessarily the care and the attention to detail that needed to be in place. And that's really why I started it was the care and knowing that this is really the one and only time that they're going to be doing this. And it's something that's super important.
So what I'm hearing is you were doing a very important job for a DSO, right?
Mhm.
In looking at purchasing dental practices to bring them into the fold, and there needed to be a lot of care. So when I kind of teased or said you must have been very heart-centered focused, right? Thinking, wow, these practice owners, they really need care. Like they really need to understand what's going on here. That's what I hear in that story, seeing the
Mhm.
problem that you were solving. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And so now you were doing it for 4 years. You're like, it didn't take me 4 years, but you were there for 4 years. So what was the pivotal moment where you realized that the industry needed your solution and you need to like break out of that mold and build a different mold, a different solution for these owners?
Yeah, so I probably knew that this was something that needed to exist in the marketplace long before I left. And unfortunately, I just, got tied up in the day to day, and it's obviously a big, leap of faith to go out and start your own business. And so it took a little bit of time for me to actually make the step, but once I made the step last year, I never looked back, and it's been super rewarding to be able to help everyone out. And ultimately, like I said, the end goal is to, make a difference in, the outcome and what we're able to help them achieve at the end of the day when they go to sell their practice.
And let's just be really transparent, right? And honest here, right?
Hmm.
We're all business owners and we've been in dental industry and stuff like that. That probably was a very comfortable position, that you were in.
Yep.
And this doesn't have to have an answer, but what happened in your world or something personal or just that moment that you're like, okay, now's the time, like in doing that, making that decision to get uncomfortable and solve
Hmm.
this problem differently for these practice owners.
Yeah, I think really I was kind of, pushed to do it. And that wasn't necessarily my own doing. I think the dental M&A market as a whole changed. Kind of back in 2023 when interest rates started increasing, and it became more expensive for these platforms, these DSOs, to get loans out to acquire practices. And so that kind of fundamentally changed the market at that point. And like I said, I was fortunate that I was kind of in a position where I was kind of pushed to go out and start on my own. I thought that it was a great opportunity and time for me to leave where we weren't super active, and obviously there were headwinds in the industry, and thought that if there was going to be any time that was best to go out on my own, it was going to be this time. And like I said, it's definitely been a challenge to go out and start your own business. You're used to just doing one line of work, and all of a sudden you have to worry about marketing. You have to worry about creating a website, little things that you don't really think about before. And it's been a very rewarding challenge. And at the end of the day, I have to come back and remember why I'm doing it, and ultimately here to make a difference in the space.
Well, and you are here to make a difference, right? And even in hearing your struggles, because I know how successful you are. I know your company and being in the group with you as a backstage member, what you're bringing to the table for these practice owners and these emerging groups and that sort of thing. But thinking about the emotion, is it
Mhm.
fear? Is it grief? Is it clarity? Right? It's like this experience, like what did it teach you in the profession? Um, to you going through this, and how is that helping you deal with, well, these emerging groups that they're dealing with all these problems too, right? They didn't
Mhm.
understand how hard it is and all the shifts and changes. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll say is you definitely don't sleep as well as you used to. It's hard to turn your brain off because you're always thinking of new ways to approach something, new ideas. And so, it's been a very rewarding challenge. It's been great to learn new skill sets. I'm in a unique position where I started this on my own, and I'm still, as of right now, working on my own. And so, I have my hands in a lot of different things at once, and being busy is a great thing. It makes me incredibly driven, and especially seeing the kind of results that we're able to provide to doctors and dental practice owners. That's the kind of stuff that makes the work all worth it. And so, it definitely, when you go, I think, to initially take that first leap of faith, you do, you worry, like, am I going to fall flat on my face, but at the same time, you can't be afraid to fail, because if this is the one thing that, you can make a difference even in just one person's life, in my mind, that's entirely worth it.
And I think that's what makes you so different and how you're helping so many people is because you feel them. You feel what they're doing, and it has made you dig deeper in your expertise and finding
Hmm.
different solutions and knowing that there's a bigger picture. It's not just easy. You're not just looking at one thing, but you're really helping them look at the full picture to make the best decision.
Absolutely.
I think that's huge for what you offer in the industry, and it's not out there very often, not at all. So this is
No.
so excited, Austin, to have you in this group for that because it's so needed. Um, let's kind of go into some core questions here.
Hmm.
If you didn't have anything else to add to that, is what do you think the biggest misconception dentists or groups have in this category and, for um um buying or selling their practices, and how do you do this differently?
Yeah, so I think probably the biggest misconception, and really the whole focus of what I do is around dentists selling their practice. And I think there's a huge misconception out there that all DSOs are bad. And unfortunately, there are certainly bad players, or there have been bad players that have been in the space that, it's really easy for word to get around, where they might not have that care or attention for a partner or practice that they've just acquired. And so, I think that you know I think I think generally, I think they're starting to understand the benefits of selling to a DSO. I mean, at the end of the day, this is an opportunity and an avenue that hasn't existed in the past. If you go a decade back, sure, there were DSOs, but there wasn't the kind of money and capital behind it. And so for, dental practice owners that have spent their entire lives, decades even, building their practices, they finally have a way to capture the hard earned work that they built in their practice in some sort of liquidity event. And, of course, there are provider to provider transactions where, a dentist will sell to another dentist, but unfortunately, you don't get the same kind of capital out of it that you do selling to a DSO. And so this is really an avenue that's really opened up that, at the end of the day, allows them to unlock the equity that they've built in their practice. And at the end of the day, they've worked really hard to establish themselves in their community to build a thriving big practice, and they deserve to have the liquidity and be able to step away at the end of the day, which is a solution that they're fully able to offer. Obviously, I encourage everyone to do your diligence on who you're potentially partnering with, because there are good and there are bad options, but at the same time, I don't think DSOs are bad. At the end of the day, it's a great opportunity for you to liquidate what you've built, and to find a partner for kind of the last couple of years of your career, and have a smooth transition into retirement.
Okay, so that you said so many good things there. Honestly, that was just gold. I'm going to dig in just a little bit more, okay?
Hmm.
Because there are horror stories out there.
Yep.
I've dealt with doctors who have sold and they really didn't get the monies, the equity, all the things, the
Hmm.
liquidities that they needed, and they have to start working again.
Yep.
Or they didn't like their partner, right?
Hmm.
And so kind of goes into my question too, what would happen to a dentist if they tried to do this on their own? Like, how would you help them really finding the heart-centered right partner for them so they could make the best decision out there? Because they can really benefit by connecting with the right emerging groups or,
Hmm.
the DSOs that are really taking care of their doctors, but really it's also making sure they're protected in the deal.
Yep, absolutely. And so there, it kind of plays into a couple different things. So one is being ready to sell. And so that's, falls into our pre-sale advisory arm. So we help dental practice owners all the time, that might be 12, 18, 24 months out, even further out. How do you get ready to sell your practice? I think a big issue in today's market is that there's a lack of education in what it looks like to sell, who are what deal structures look like, who are potential people that you can sell to, or groups that you can sell to. And so getting ready to sell is a super big piece of it. And so that's, that's all encompassing, right? That's getting your personal wealth, together, your tax plan. That's getting your books in order. And also there's a huge mental piece of that. There's conversations that you have to have with your family. Are you ready to do this now? It's not an easy decision. And once again, it's not something that should be taken lightly either. So, the prep and getting ready for it, I think, is a huge piece. But, when you are ready to go sell and to go to market, it's almost like speed dating. And, it does happen quick, because a lot of times, you're going to be picking a partner within a few months. And so there's a lot of things that you have to take in, questions you have to ask, but the more that you can be prepared on the front end for that, the better off you're going to be at the end of the day. Um, and so, once again, it's kind of like speed dating where, you're starting to meet a bunch of different groups at the same time. And, you have to understand and know yourself what's important to you, what you're looking for in a partner. So that at the end of the day, when you do make a decision, it's not always going to be about who gives you the most amount of, the biggest deal at the end of the day. I think, some of the more intangible things about who's going to be a great partner to help you, finish out working the last 4 years of your career. That's the kind of stuff that, I think should really be a focus in all of this because, if you're going to be unhappy day one, it doesn't matter how much money you received and in the transaction, it's going to be a long 4 years. And, you're good. You don't want to dread every second of it. And, especially if, there are groups that, if they do change things in your practice, in your office, are you going to be okay with that? Is that something that you're going to want to deal with? There's a lot of factors and things to consider, but ultimately, in order for you to make a good decision on who your potential partner is going to be, there's a lot of prep, there's a lot of getting ready, and there's a lot of, time that, unfortunately, I know we all don't have, but, you're still going to be practicing day in and day out and having these calls after work. It's a tough process and it's not easy, but at the end of the day, we want to help ultimately find you the best home and the best fit for what you're looking for. And so I think the fit is a super key important piece that really hasn't been focused on super, a lot in the past.
Yeah, I think the analogy that you said was powerful in that it's like speed dating because, you're saying they decide in a couple months, right?
Hmm.
I think where the nightmare stories come in is it's hard for them to emotionally separate themselves and to see the red flags and to
Yep.
really know what to look for. So where do
Hmm.
you see most leaders like getting stuck in that or how you have helped some of your clients be careful about that? I mean, because that's kind of one of the main things, right? Is setting them up for success and watching out for
Hmm.
those red flags.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece was to understand especially if you're in the middle of a process and you're selling your practice and you're speaking with all of these DSOs and other groups. I think the biggest and most important thing is to spend the time up front before you start to see any numbers and potential, transactions, is to really understand who's a fit for you, whether it's culturally, whether it's for your team members, for your practice. Really take the time to understand what changes, what doesn't change. Really take the time into figuring that out and who you like before you even see any of the offers come in. Because at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I see one group has, a significant amount of more money, you get tempted to go that direction, but is it going to be the right fit? Maybe not. And so being able to understand who you're going to be partnering with is so important, and I think that's the time that you really have to take is up front, learning and understanding what changes, what's going to happen with these groups, and ultimately finding, your perfect fit.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's that is just so important. Um,
Hmm.
and I just don't think people can do it on their own. And I also, let's say speed dating, right? Speed
Hmm.
dating is when you have all these people and they're going through a room and you have choices,
Yeah.
right? Instead of one or two, and they get kind of nervous or they just settle, right? So not just settling, like really you helping them understand what's important, that sort of thing, and not to settle. And that helps with the red flags too, so they can make the right decision for their families. And that's kind of how you started out saying they weren't educated enough. They didn't have, enough
Hmm.
offers. Like they just didn't know enough
Yep.
to
Absolutely.
make that right decision. So that kind of leads me to kind of like what is your like when you're dealing with your clients, what's your personal philosophy about leadership or culture that really sets your work apart with the clients that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say, envision myself as a part of their family. If we're going to be working for, 6+ months together, even a year, especially for some of our pre-sale advisory clients, we're working with them, potentially years ahead of their transaction. I think it's super important to, so for example, I come from a Southern family, and so whether you're family or not, you're treated like family. And I think that is kind of the approach that I've taken is, you want to picture yourself like this is something that's going to be affecting you. And that way you treat every decision, you treat every conversation, with the same respect and importance as if it was something that was happening to you. And I think that's the kind of stuff that, really makes a big difference is understanding, taking the time to understand upfront what's important to them, what's, key things that they need to see from a future partner, deal structures, whatever it might be, taking that time to understand and put yourself in their shoes. And then ultimately, like you said, when it does become a lot where you're, speed dating, you're, meeting with, 5 to 10 different groups, and, you've met with all of them over the last 2 weeks, and you're still working and you have a family, like it can become a lot. And I think that's where, having someone that's in your corner that you can trust and to be able to guide you and tell you, hey, this is what you told me, when we first talked, like this is something that's important to you. When we talked with this group, this is exactly what I heard from them, and it kind of matches with you. So being able to be a partner in their corner, someone who's also, been through more of these transactions than I wish to admit, but being able to be in their corner when it matters most, and to help guide them, because it does get overwhelming. I will say most people do get what we call deal fatigue, where
Hmm.
it's just a lot of information, it's a lot of work, and it's all on top of your everyday life. So you're just adding this and layering this in on top of everything else, and that's where it's becomes even more important to have someone in your corner that's fighting for you and knows what to do and make sure that you don't get taken advantage of, or you don't make the wrong decision.
I love that. Kind of leads into like my next question was, after, because you said it could take anywhere from 6 months to a year. So after working with you for a year, what's like the measurable differences do your clients typically see, or what do you hear from them after they are kind of done and, you've succeeded in the sale of their practice?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, in my mind, that when someone goes to sell and let's say they're 6 months out or past from selling, I think the biggest thing is that um, I think the first and biggest thing is that their patients don't see a difference, right? They're
Mm,
coming in, it's the same old practice. Nothing has changed. Maybe the only thing that's changed is they're now using Square to check out, and they were using some other terminal before, something that's super minor, so that at the end of the day, the patient experience doesn't change. And then, you kind of take another step from that. You want to make sure that your office staff and everyone that works for you is super happy. And so I think the super successful partnerships or transactions or things where, well, first and foremost, those things don't change. Your office staff is happy. Everyone can continue doing their job like they used to. And then at the end of the
mhm.
day, there's no difference in patient care. If anything, there's potentially a benefit. Something changes to the patient's benefits. Maybe this group is able to bring in better pricing, and so you're able to make it more affordable for your patients, something like that. But at the end of the day, those are, in my mind, what's most important and will lead to, super successful outcomes.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the nightmares that we hear, to be honest, right? Is that the team all of a sudden is not happy because of the changes, and then the patients are like, "What's going on?" and they leave. And
Yep.
so we want both really to be successful, right? So that's kind of a game changer in the way that, you're setting them up for success and how they're
hmm
typically seeing what's happening, that both looking at the numbers, what they're making, and their peace of mind. It sounds like
hmm
that's how you're measuring success for your
hmm
clients. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so because at the end of the day, when you go to partner with a DSO and you're still going to have to work for them in most cases 3 to 5 years, if not 4 to 5 years, and so you want to make sure that you're having a good solid partner for those remainders remaining years that you have to work out with that future partner.
Yeah, that makes me think of a question that I think all dentists need to know, right? Because you're saying that to sell your practice, you need to work with them 3 to 5 years. Okay. Let's say that's just
hmm
kind of the average. So, when should these doctors reach out to you and start planning? Because a lot of them say, oh, 1, 2 years, and that's really, they can get, what's the benefit of planning ahead? Like, just kind of walk
hmm
me through, like, let's say I was a doctor and I'm kind of thinking about it and that sort of thing. Give me the best advice that you give dentists to how to just get be cell ready all the time. Like what does that time frame look like?
Yeah, so very easy answer to that is today. Reach out today. You can't be prepped early enough, even if you want to sell in 2 or 3 years. I think it's important for anyone to start to understand what the market looks like, what, deal structures look like, who the players are. Really just it goes back to that education piece, right? The more educated that we can make dentists when they go to sell, the better outcomes we're going to create in the market. And so, but realistically, if we're working backwards from it, so let's say you do have to work 5 years, and ultimately DSOs and buyers are going to want to see you work those 4 to 5 years because at the end of the day, that's where you're going to get the most value out of your transaction. If you're working less than 3 years, the value that you get at the transaction is gonna take a hit. And that's just, there's a number of factors that play into that, but I would say pretty unanimously across, the buyer universe. Um, if you're working, a year or two, they're not going to be able to give you the same deal because they're going to have to focus on getting a new provider in there. There's a lot of risk that they inherently take on at that point, that they, can, if you work 5 years, they have 5 years to plan for your transition, your retirement, and bringing someone in there that the community and your patients will fully accept and can take over kind of a 3 year period. So if we're working backwards, and you need to work 5 years, um, if you were to say I'm ready to sell today, it would still take you 6 to 12 months to be able to sell. There's a couple months, there's, I would say a month or two of prep work before you can even go to market. Then when you're in market, it's another month or two of, that speed dating where you're getting to meet everyone. And then once you decide, a group that you're wanting to go with, they're going to have diligence and a process that they have to run on their end, to make sure that everything checks out and to ultimately get their integrations team ready so that when you do come in, they have all the answers. They have everything that, aligns with their systems that they can get you onboarded. So that'll take 2 to 3 months in and of itself. So when you start working back, if you were to say, I'm ready to sell today, you're still looking at probably close to, 6 months to a year before, your paycheck actually hits the bank and you're partnered with a new group. And then you have to work 5 years. And so let's say, you want to think about selling in a year. Well, I think that's, the perfect time to, people that are a year to two out, I think that's the perfect time to really take the time to focus and look inward on their practice. And, you have enough time at that point to make substantial changes. And so, let's just use an example. So let's say you're able to save, $1,000 in your expenses at the end of the day, between now and when you go to sell, you will receive a multiple on that. So you'll receive, 6, 7,000 as a return for that money that you save. So I think, being able to get yourself prepped, and that kind of falls into the pre-sale advisory piece that we have, where, the more time that you have to get prepped and to get buyer ready, the better off you're going to be. You're going to be able to unlock additional value, potentially even bring in some more partners to help unlock growth.
Mm.
And really just set yourself up for success when your time is ready.
I mean, I think that is such an important point just because I've had conversations with so many dentists and they're older and they're not
Mhm.
realizing kind of the market, working with these groups, like what needs to happen to even, build up their EBITDA and how easy it is if you're advised by the right person, because
Mhm.
then your exit is smart. That's bottom line is so even if it's 5 years, even if it's 10 years, always be ready for that because you have
Mhm.
so many more options.
You do.
So it doesn't, I mean, I think they're afraid to talk to brokers and different things like that. So why aren't you scary? Well, why should they call you and get to know you and that sort of thing, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I like to treat this as, we're kind of a family in this, and, we're not in it for the payday. We're in it to create better and more successful outcomes in the space. I unfortunately, in my previous job, saw way too many times where things went south, and, it's, this is their baby, right? You want to treat their baby with the most respect and care, and really nurture it. And so, that's the approach that we take with every client. Everyone, I want to feel like we're family and in this together. And, at the end of the day, um, our goal is to, help you find the best path for, whether it's retirement, whether it's selling, whatever it might be, really just help educate people and get them ready for this.
I mean, that really speaks to my heart. I've been in dentistry since 87. I have a AI omnipresence agency, and when we're talking about their marketing message, what drives them, they always say, we love our patients, we treat them like family, they become our family. And especially from your upbringing, where you're coming from, I mean, that will just speak to their heart that they can rely on somebody just to even have a conversation so they can understand what they really need in the future,
Yep.
right? And have that peace of mind that they're going to do it the smart way. They're going to take care of their family and their legacy that they're seeing so many people are kind of losing and not doing it correctly with the groups because there are so many heart-centered emerging groups. It is, I mean, that leads me into kind of my last question is, where do you see dentistry heading in 5 years? And how are you preparing these dentists for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And look, at the end of the day, I wish I had the magic 8 ball in front of me and I could shake it and give you an exact answer. But at the end of the day, especially as rates continue to come down, there's going to be more and more capital that's pumped into the space from private equity groups. And the whole consolidation game is going to continue. And so ultimately, where that is in 5 years, I think, rough estimates were 30% consolidated right now. Depends on the source that you check. But let's say we are 30% consolidated. I think there's going to be, if a very significant push to keep that number moving into, move it up 30, 40, 50% to where at the end of the day, I do think that DSOs and these larger groups are here to stay. And, the most important part for me is, how do we help you unlock what you've built and to take advantage of the capital that's in the space and, really help you succeed and, into transitioning and selling your practice. So, at the end of the day, I think the consolidation game is still going to continue going. And we ultimately want to help you get set up for success in as that comes.
I love that. Thank you so much for just sharing your heart and so much knowledge to help support them in a very
Absolutely.
big decision. So what's the one belief you hope every listener takes away today?
One belief. That's a great question. Um, I think it really comes down to, treating everyone with respect. And, I think, no matter where someone's coming from, what they've been through, I think it's always important to treat every conversation, every person that you interact with respect. And, I think that'll only take us further.
We need that as humans, don't we?
We do.
What we're doing,
Yep.
yeah, good things with good people. That's what we want.
Absolutely.
Oh, that was so good. Thank you, Austin. That I just feel inspired. I'm, excited to share your information with a lot of the doctors I work with because I do care about them too, and I know so many of our members do. Um, I just feel like I could have asked you so many more questions, so we'll just have to do another podcast too, like kind of
Absolutely.
deep dive into some.
I would love to come back on. I'm happy to come on anytime.
Good, good, good. Yeah. So like yeah, let's really think through like juicy bits, like some good takeaways, and we can even attach something that they can download from this podcast, like takeaway from everything that you've given them, the knowledge and stuff like that. But again, thank you so much for joining us here um at the Backstage podcast. We're so excited to share you with so many of the doctors that we're running into.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Austin.